Welcome to this first webinar of a series. I would like to introduce, well, to thank you for being here today. And I would like to introduce the first speaker of this webinar, Josée Kirps, who is the president of the International Council Association. So please.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from for today. So my name is Josée Kirps, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar, Transforming Heritage Formats, Authenticity and Preservation. I would like to begin by extending a heartfelt thank you to our partner, the Eureka 3D Consortium, for their valuable collaboration and support in organizing this important webinar series. Your commitment to advancing the field of archival science, particularly in this digital age, is deeply appreciated, and we are very grateful for this partnership. As president of the International Council on Archives, is it both an honor and a privilege to see so many dedicated professionals from around the world coming together to engage in this vital conversation. The ICA's mission is to promote the preservation and accessibility of archives globally, ensuring that records of all types, traditional and digital, remain reliable and authentic sources of knowledge and history. Today's webinar aligns perfectly with this mission as we explore the complexities of ensuring the authenticity of digital media and the evolving challenges of preserving our digital heritage. In a time of a rapid evolving technology, the need to safeguard the authenticity and integrity of digital records has never been more pressing. As archivists and heritage professionals, we have a duty to ensure that the records and heritage we preserve are authentic, truthworthy, and accessible to future generations. This webinar provides a platform to share expertise, exchange ideas, and develop strategies that will help us meet this challenge. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for your participation today. Your dedication to advancing the field of archives and heritage preservation is what makes these discussions possible and meaningful. Together, we are taking significant steps toward ensuring the long-term preservation and authenticity of our shared digital heritage. Once again, my sincerest thanks to the Eureka 3D Consortium and all of you for making this event possible. I wish you all an insightful and engaging webinar. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your invitation for today.
Dear Josée, many thanks for this. So we are now ready to dive into the Eureka 3D description, and I would like to invite Antonella Fresa, who is the coordinator of Eureka 3D on stage. And before, sorry, one more second. Before giving the floor to Antonella, I would like to remind all the participants that you can put your questions in the Q&A chat. So please don't forget to use it. Thanks.
Antonella,
you're muted.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen to give a very short overview of the Eureka 3D project, because you know very well the International Council on Archives, the introduction of Josée Kirps have given you an idea of the mission that we wanted to achieve with these webinars, I think that it could be useful also to add a few words on what is it, Eureka 3D. Yes, you know, now let's see. Okay. This seminar is the first of the second series of webinars that will run in 2024. The first series ran in the fall 2023. The recordings are available on a website at the address that you see on the screen, and this is the second series. So we think that instead of a huge conference that maybe is not affordable for everybody with many topics all together, we choose one topic and we explore it with a dedicated lecture from an informed scholar. In this second series, we will address three topics. The first is the topic of today, digital media authenticity. In the second webinar that will take place on the 24th of October from 5:30 to 6:30 CET, and it's the World Day of Audiovisual Heritage, so we combine this celebration with our webinar. And this second webinar will tackle the new dimension for audiovisual heritage, and in particular the Eureka 3D initiative. The third webinar on the 3rd of November 2024 is addressing the topic of 3D formats and preservation, and you will hear there how complex is this aspect. But who we are, what we did, and what we will do next. We are the consortium of Eureka 3D. That is a project focused on helping institutions with the implementation of a high-quality 3D digitization. And we will do it through guidelines, tools, case studies, and capacity building activities. One example is the 3D digitization guideline, Steps to Success, a synthesis of a study that was tendered and contracted by the European Commission to the Cyprus University of Technology, and that produced a very dense study. We extracted from this study a step-by-step guideline, and you can download it also from the website or through the QR code. Eureka 3D XR is a continuation of Eureka 3D to develop innovative reuse scenarios, because in Eureka 3D we support the production of 3D, but then this 3D should be used in scenarios and tools that enable the creation of extended reality application, what is referred as XR application. So Eureka 3D is a project by the Digital Europe program of the European Commission. It started on the 1st of January 23, and the last 2 years it will end at the end of 24. The coordinator is a Photo Consortium International Association, that is one of the aggregators of Europeana, with a very skilled partnership. CRDI, that is the archival service of the municipality of Girona, member of ICA. Bibract, the archaeological center in France. Museo della Carta, a museum of paper in the province of Pistoia in Tuscany, a very special museum that is hosted in an ancient 1700 factory of paper that produced the paper for all over the world. the Cyprus University of Technology, that is the author of the study on 3D, EGI, and Ilaria, who introduced me, is from the European Grid Initiative, a federation of the cloud providers in Europe. IMEC, you will hear from Frederik, who is the representative of IMEC in Eureka 3D, and the Europeana Foundation, with the objective to implement a data cloud and services in the data space for cultural heritage. You know, maybe that the data space for cultural heritage is one of the flag initiatives of the European Commission. The concept is that we want to produce not a geometrical representation of a cultural heritage only, but a memory twin, a twin of the memory that that object brings with this. So we need a lot of information. And in order to manage this information, we created in Eureka 3D a data hub. A data hub that is hosted in one of the cloud providers federated by EGI. The data hub provides European-based storage facilities, authentication and authorization infrastructure, persistent identifiers, visualization tools. The 3D needs a special visualization. You will hear about this in the third seminar, fully integrated and compatible with Europeana. But this is accompanied by a capacity building on high quality 3D digitization, an aggregation of the contents with the Europeana and compatible with the data space for cultural heritage. As said, the Eureka 3D ends at the end of December. It will continue in Eureka 3D XR. Eureka 3D XR is again another project funded by the Digital Europe program. It will start on the 1st of February 25. It will last 1 and 5 years. The coordinator is still Photo Consortium International Association. The consortium is enlarged with the participation of SMEs and research centers that can focus on the production and the capacity building around XR application. And these are from Sicily, that is Swing IT, the Mira Lab Research Center in Switzerland, and the Technical University of Athens that will collaborate with the content providers to transform cultural contents, 2D, 3D, video, text, maps, into stories, into extended reality scenarios, to deliver these scenarios to the Europeana Common Data Space for Cultural Heritage, and to continue the effort to strengthen the capacity of cultural heritage. And for this, we have included in the consortium a dedicated partner that is a MEMO from Brussels, from the Flanders. These are the 3 scenarios that will be developed in Eureka 3D XR. The first is a virtual visualization of the Middle Ages walls of the city of Girona. Maps, photographs, archival documents will be digested, processed and digested by tools that use also artificial intelligence techniques to produce a reconstruction of the full wall of historical wall of Girona, because only some portions, only some bastions or small portions of the walls remains intact. And this is happening in several places all over Europe, all over the world. The second scenario is the XR narrative of excavations that are in process in Vibrat, the archaeological site in Borgogne. And this is an experience to become an archaeologist and to stay with the archaeologists while they are excavating cells, these very important cells location. This, just a curiosity, was the place where Julius Caesar sit, because they were in friendship with the Romans, and wrote a big portion of his De Bello Galli. The third scenario is the creation of a new life of the Saint Neophytos Englista in Cyprus, in a virtual space, where saints, the saint and the monks around him will tell stories about their life in this Englista. So I have finished my presentation. I just wanted to conclude inviting everybody who is interested to participate in the final conference of Eureka 3D that will take place in Girona on the 13th of December 2024. It will be an hybrid event, in person and online, public conference and dedicated workshops that will go deeper and hands-on experience of digitization. You can follow us online on many channels. And I give back the floor because there are more technical information for which you are attending this webinar. Thank you very much. And
thank you,
I remain
Antonella.
here, and we can continue our discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the concise but very informative presentation about the project. Now it's time to give the floor to our keynote speaker for today, who is Frederik Temmermans, who is a researcher in multimedia interoperability at the Free University in Brussels and EMEC as well, and also a member of the JPEG committee. So he knows a lot about images and pictures, and it will tell us. So Frederik, thanks so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I was just having a look at the chat, and I see we have people attending from all over the world, which I think is fantastic. It's amazing to see that people are interested, of course, in cultural heritage, but also about this topic on digital media authenticity, which is a topic that I've been passionate about for several years now. And it's my honor to give you some insights on this topic. So, last summer in June, I had the opportunity to visit the Louvre Museum in Paris. And of course, if you visit the Louvre Museum, then one of the masterpieces that you have to see is the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. And this is an image that I took. So as you can see, I was not the only one. There was lots of people interested, and I could not even come remotely close to the artwork. Now, luckily, these days, we have digitizations of lots of artworks which are available online at an amazing resolution, at an amazing quality. And in these images, you can see little details, the finest paint strokes of the master that you cannot even see in reality, even if you would not, if you would be able to come much closer to the actual artwork than what was possible in reality. However, if you look on Google, for example, for images of the Mona Lisa, you will find a lot of them, and I've pictured a few of them here. And there's a few things that you will notice. First of all, if you look at the second last one, for example, it's actually not Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci, but it's an interpretation of Mona Lisa by another artist. Obviously, if you look at the last one, the cat does not belong in the original painting. But if you focus on the first three, these are, well, quite close to what we expect to see if you have seen the original. But there are quite some important differences. I don't know how well it pictures on the screen, because the screen also has an impact on how colors are rendered. But you should be able to see that there is quite some variation in colors, in contrast, and even in some cases related to dimensions. And that is because all of these images, they have been captured at a different moment in time and using different equipment and so on. Here is another example, and this is a Tower of Babel by Bruegel. And these are two of the highest quality images that you can find on the web of this painting. These are really gigapixel images. One is coming from a website insidebruegel.net, and the other one is coming from the Google Art project. And here again, so as I said, both very high quality images, but if you look at them next to each other, you'll notice some quite noticeable differences. Again, in terms of contrast, in terms of color, these images do not look the same. And it might be that they have been taken at a different moment of time, and that meanwhile a restoration procedure happened to the painting. But in this case, I can tell you that's not the case. They have been taken at a not so far distance from each other, but still we see those differences. Now, the problem is, if you want to make any assessment, a scientific assessment of these paintings, especially if we have multiple digitizations taken over time, then we need an equal base, or at least we need to know what the circumstances were under which these images were digitized. And in this specific case, if you look at inside Bruegel, you will be able to find all the information on which camera was used, which lenses were used, which filters have been used, what the light setup was, and so on. So there's a lot of information that has been provided. Also the date, exact date on when the images were captured. For the Google Art project, on the other hand, we don't have such information. So it's anyone's guess on how exactly these images were taken. And why does it matter, and why give I so much importance to this? Well, because it's absolutely crucial to realize that digitization is a static capture of a dynamic object at a certain moment in time. If you look at these paintings, for example, if you look at this painting 50 years ago or today, or in 50 years from now in the future, they will not look the same. First of all, materials, they change and they degrade over time. And secondly, every so many decades, restoration treatment will be needed. So these are dynamic objects. The digitization, on the other hand, that is taken at a specific moment in time, and it's just captured at that specific moment. And of course, if we have multiple of such digitizations, we want to be able to compare them. Secondly, all the pictures I've shown so far are 2D images. And typically we think of as a painting as a 2D object, but it is not, it's a 3D object. First of all, in many cases, the canvas is actually curved. And in addition, there is depth to the layers of the paint and to the cracks in the paint and so on. So that means that we're looking at a 2D projection of a 3D object. So by definition, there will be deformations. So if you want to make a measurement, for example, you have to take that into account, and you need to be able somehow to assess what the extent of these deformations are. Then, in addition to that, the 2D projection, all the equipment that was used, the practices that were used, and the experience of the people that were making this digitization, the actual settings, so for objects that are taken outside, is also whether it's cloudy or sunny or the temperature can have an impact on the size of certain materials. All of these circumstances at the moment of capture, they do have an impact on the final results. And once again, so if you want to make any scientific assessments, then these circumstances, the exact digitization circumstances, are absolutely essential to have. And these circumstances, so this information about all the circumstances during the moment of digitization, is what we typically refer to as paradata. And within Eureka 3D, we have made a huge campaign to spread the word on how important it is to digitally capture this paradata and to store it with the actual digitized content. And we already did a seminar on this specific topic. I've added a link in the slides. These were organized in April and May of this year. So I'll not go in much further detail on this topic, but I just want to emphasize that if you want to provide transparency and if you want to make any conclusions based on digitized objects, this is absolutely crucial. Now, let's take a step further. So while looking for images of the Mona Lisa, I showed these various variations. But nowadays, we have tools based on artificial intelligence that also allow us to manipulate the content. So we're not only speaking about unintentional deviations between different captures, we're speaking about intentional changes that have been made to the content. And in many cases, like the case that I'm picturing here, it's funny and it's made to spread as memes on social media, for example. But you also have to realize that these tools can be used, for example, to increase the resolution, which is very nice. You can have better looking images. But of course, if you increase the resolution of an image with data which you don't have, you're introducing also information which does not actually exist. And to give an extreme example, here is an example where an AI tool was asked to fill the background to a white screen based on the picture of the Mona Lisa. And this is what came out. And of course, this painting is super famous, and we all know that there is no such background. But you have to admit that this looks fairly realistic and fairly close to the background that was drawn by Da Vinci. And this is just an illustrative example, but you can see that it becomes more and more difficult to distinguish between what is real, what is authentic, and what is fake or what has been manipulated. And to illustrate how difficult it has become, I would like to do some polls, and I would like you to ask you the question for some images. I will start with this one. If you think if this image is real, is this an authentic image, or do you think that this is a fake or manipulated image? And I'll just give it some time before we have some answers in. We have 80 results. Give it a few more seconds. Okay. 90. Okay, let's see if we can get it to 100. No, I think almost. Yeah, okay. I'll end the poll here. But the results of the poll are that in this case, so 32 people of the audience, think it's a real image, and 68% think it's a fake image. So let's have a look. This image is a real image, and it doesn't look natural, but it's an image taken in Australia. It's a cloud storm, so what you see, it's not actually a wave. These are clouds, and there's sand coming in from the land, giving this brown appearance. So that was the first one. Let's do another one. So this one. So if you can open the next poll, and I'll give it a few seconds time to see what you think of this image. So again, I'm going to close the poll. I think it's again fair to say that, well, there is not really an agreement. So 34% thinks it is real and 66% thinks it is fake. So let's have a look. In this case, again, this is a real image. It doesn't look real because this is a picture taken from a strange perspective and it's taken from the top to the bottom. But these are trees that fell down during a storm, hence the strange perspective. But this is a real, authentic image. Okay, next one. So if we can go to poll number 3, and again, I'll give you some time. And it looks like the result is very similar to the previous image. So 32% thinks real, 67% thinks it is fake. In this case, it is indeed fake. As you can see, this is an artwork. This has been created in a fixed way, and 2 images were combined with each other to make that previous image. Okay, next one. Also a funny one. Okay, so for this one, we're relatively close to 50-50 or 46-54 now. So let's have a look at the results. So again, this one was a fake. This was 2 images blended by use of AI into a new one, which didn't look realistic, but it also was not a real image. There's a few more. What do you think about this one? We'll do 8 in total for your information. So this is the 5th one. So we'll do 3 more and then we'll come to some conclusions. So for this one, I think the majority is indicating they believe this is fake. It's a 75% think it is fake, 25% thinks it is real. Well, this is a real image. Again, it's taken from an angle which makes it look a little bit weird, but it's actually an hotel in South Korea, and it does actually exist. And the previous image was also a real one. What about this one? Okay, so we seems to end with a 60-40 percentage for this one. Again, this one is a fake image, and you can see the original image on the right side. I think this will be the last one. And this is going head-to-head around the 50-50%. With a slight advantage into fake, but initially the first results were mostly indicating as expected to be real. So for this one, again, it's a fake one. It's a stock image of a beer, which has been combined with another image. So, okay, apparently we have one more, but I don't know if we have another poll. Somehow I think we missed one, so I don't know if we can do another poll. Otherwise, I'll just show the results. Okay, we can do one more. So again, we're ending close to 50-50%. And we're now exactly at 50-50%. If you look at the results, this was another one which is real. So this thing, it's a lion's mane jellyfish, which does actually exist, and you can find several videos and images of it online. Anyway, just to come back to the point, as you have noticed, it's really difficult to tell whether something is real or fake. I think probably there were a little bit more fake answers than real answers, maybe given the context and the background. But in many cases, it's 50-50%, and it's really, really hard to tell whether something has been manipulated or not. That's basically the message that I wanted to make. And obviously this can be fun and you can make memes with it, like most of the images I've actually shown. But clearly there is a political, there is a societal, there is an economical impact of this that needs to be taken into account, that needs to be taken seriously. Especially for the economic impact, for example, it's difficult to estimate exactly what the economic impact is, but there have been some studies. There's a figure here from a study on fake news from 2019, estimating the economical damage to $78 billion US. Of course, it's only a limited fraction which is related to digital media or manipulated media. But one of my dear colleagues, which I think is also in the audience, Sabrina Caldwell, has done some study to make some of these estimations, and we're looking then at insurance fraud and personal damage, all these kind of implications of manipulated media. And the main point is we're speaking about still billions of dollars. So it's really something to be taken serious. And this has been picked up by lawmakers as well. We have seen the rise of the EU AI Act in Europe, similar situation in the United States with an executive order on the team by Biden. In China, again, they're quickly making new regulations to do something about it. But that's the actual question. Technically, what can we do about it, or what should we do about it? And one of the things what we can do is to use detection methods, and typically AI-based detection methods. So we feed an AI-based model with millions of examples of real images and fake images, and we train it to learn to make the difference. And as a matter of fact, these AI algorithms, in many cases, or in most cases, they are better to make this distinction than what we are. As I've just indicated, I think we have to admit that we're not exactly that good at making the distinction. So you feed it with an image, and it will tell you whether it's fake or not with a certain precision. We can build in these algorithms into social media. We can build them into operating systems and imaging software, and then problem is solved, right? Well, problem is it's actually not, because there's one major pitfall with such an approach, and that's the cat and mouse nature. So these detection methods, they always come better and they continuously improve, but so do the methods that generate the content. So one is always running a little bit behind the other. And as you might know, with these cat and mouse games, such a chase can last for a long, long time and actually will never come to a real solution. So what else can we do? We're looking at means where we can provide verifiable provenance information from the creation of the media, when it is created, until the moment that it is perceived by the end user. So that's what we want to achieve. And with provenance, in this case, we're talking about the provenance of the digital media. We're not talking about the provenance of the objects in this case, because sometimes there's some confusion about this term of provenance. But first of all, so if you want to go in that direction, we do already have the traditional metadata. So if you capture a picture, always there will be some metadata embedded in it. And that includes the location, the time, the camera model, the settings, etc. That's all put into the image at the moment you capture it using formats like EXIF, IPTC, XMP, and so on. So for the image on the right, for example, the Louvre image from the beginning of the presentation, it does contain information that it was captured at the Louvre in Paris on the 8th of June and that it was captured with an iPhone, just as an example. It's a simplified example. Now, the problem is if you decode such an image from one format to another one, this information is not necessarily retained. And as a matter of fact, if you upload images to social media, like Facebook, for example, most of the time it is not retained. And what's even worse is that it's fairly trivial to change that information. So if you want to change the date to the 26th of September, which happens to be today, well, you can, and it will be unnoticed by most people, and it will be hard to prove that it has been changed. And even worse, the content itself, yeah, of course, you can also easily change it. So you might have noticed that the Mona Lisa has meanwhile been stolen today, and the image at the bottom. Obviously, it has not been, so it's a modification to the image. But it would, the fact that the people are all the people are taking these pictures put in a totally different perspective. And again, the original metadata and the content do not necessarily match. There's no way to verify that with this traditional metadata. So what I want to stress is if traditional metadata is present, it can provide valuable information about the authenticity of the media file. It can provide you valuable information, but it has to be carefully considered because, as I mentioned, it can be easily manipulated and it does not necessarily match with the associated content. So there are situations where you can use a metadata in a closed environment. For the pictures that you took yourself, it's perfectly fine. If you're having images that are coming from a reliable source and so on, it's all fine. But these things have to be taken into account. And then the question is, how can we improve about that? And two improvements are needed stepping up from this traditional metadata. First of all, we have to secure it in some way so that we can check whether modifications have been made, or at least that we can identify if modifications have been made. And secondly, so most of this metadata is related to the creation of the image, and as said, the image might actually change. So we would also want to have documentation on everything what happened to that image since it was created. It's called in digital media the provenance information, or persistent chain of information that documents everything what has happened with that that specific asset. Now, this can be done again with some limitations and to some extent, but by using cryptographic hashes, you can make a link between the metadata and the actual content, and that link will be signed by somebody or something. So it can be if you capture an image with a phone, for example, or with a camera, the camera can sign the image, and it can be verified that it's coming from that particular camera. The moment that you make a change to the metadata, or the moment that you make a change to the actual content, you will be able to identify that. So if it matches, it's valid. If not, well, you cannot necessarily tell exactly what happened, but at least you can tell that something is off and that maybe that media asset is not to be considered trustworthy. So once again, tampering can be identified. You cannot avoid that this information can still be stripped off, and you can also make screenshots and all these kind of things. But the fact is that we strive for a future where hopefully it becomes the de facto default that we do have provenance information, and that it does come from a reliable source, such as a camera that has been used to take it. Or if you look for images in digitization coming from renowned institutions, if the National Library says this is digitation that we have made, then, and it is signed and you can verify that it comes from them, there's no reason to doubt that. As an end user, whether you trust the National Library or not, that's another question, but at least you have means to verify that. So that's the direction that we want to go. So just to recap, you have the reactive approach with detection. There's still a role for that, but longer term, it's not really a stable solution. And then you have the proactive approach, which is working with this secure provenance signaling. There's a third approach, which is rather collaboratively and is working based on community feedback. But I'm not going to go in further detail on that now. Whatever direction we want to go, clearly, if you want to succeed, then interoperability will be essential, because if you have the metadata on one side and the other side cannot read it, then it is not useful either way. And that's the reason why we have started, and it's in this case, the JPEG Standardization Committee started working on an international standard, which is called JPEG Trust, which will tackle exactly these issues. So you might know JPEG as a file format that you use for exchanging images. It's one of the most widely adopted standards in the world, in fact, and it's coming from the Joint Photographic Experts Group, so a standardization committee under the hoods of IIC and ISO, as well as for some of the standards ITU. And as people from working in archiving, you probably also know JPEG 2000, but in addition to that, there's many other formats, and not only related to representation of images, but also related to the imaging ecosystem, and JPEG Trust is one of these. So a standard comes out of an exploration, checking the market for a need for standards. So in this case, in 2020, an exploration was started to identify what are the use cases and requirements related to fake media, and JPEG Trust is the result of that exploration. So it's a framework to provide tools to help to provide, to give insights into authenticity of media. One important thing is that as a standardization committee, or in general, nobody is able to tell whether something is trustworthy or not, because that depends on the context. And to illustrate that with a concrete example, if I have a car accident and I take an image of it and I share that image with my family members, if they know it comes from me, they will trust it. They will not doubt that it's not a real image. They know it comes from me. They know the car. They know that there was not damage to the car before, so they will trust it. But if I use the same image and I share it with my insurance company, probably they want to have other indicators that this is a trustworthy image. They want to check, is it authentic in the sense that, does it come directly from a camera without any further modifications to it? Was it taken on the date of the accident and at the location of the accident? These kind of things. These are the pieces of information that they want to verify before they will trust the image. So depending on the context, whether something is trustworthy or not can differ. And that's also core to the concept of what JPEG Trust is, and especially the core foundation, which currently covers 3 parts. So the first one is the annotating of provenance, where we align with C2PA, which is another industry initiative focused on what I've indicated before, so secure signaling of provenance information. And at this moment, this is already integrated in some cameras, which are currently on the market from Leica and Nikon, for example. Also, if you use ChatGPT to generate images, it does contain these secured metadata, the secured provenance information, and all of it is compatible with this framework JPEG Trust that I'm introducing. Secondly, we have an whole mechanism to extract those trust indicators. So these trust indicators, they can come from the metadata. As I've mentioned before, the metadata itself, it's not the best way to check whether you can trust something or not. But in some specific situations, there is valuable and trustworthy information in the metadata as well. Again, if it's in a closed environment, etc. So trust indicators can come from there. It can also come from the actual content, like the result of a detection algorithm, or it can come from the provenance information. Dus all of these are trust indicators. They can tell you something about the trustworthiness in a given scenario. And for these specific scenarios, you can make profiles. So for the insurance company, they can make a profile with all the rules that are needed for them, for the image to be considered trustworthy. And then the results of that can be communicated via a trust report back to the end user. And then finally, just one important notice, if you work with all this detailed provenance information, of course, you also have to respect the privacy of all the actors that are involved, people pictured in the image, the creators and so on. You do not always want to disclose these. So that's also something which has been taken into account from the beginning into the design of this standard. So it's a standard under development, and it will consist of multiple parts in the future. So far, the focus has been on the core foundation, which contains elements that I've just introduced, and it has recently been submitted for publication by ISO. So normally, before the end of this year, this will be an international standard. I had to be a little bit faster at the end because I was running out of time, so I'm sorry about that. But hopefully there's still sufficient time to answer some questions, and if you have further information, you can also contact me or some of the colleagues working on this, and you can also find more information on the JPEG Trust website. So thank you very much to all of you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Frederik. It was super interesting, and there are actually questions. So I can start asking you, and then you feel free to answer. So the first one is, could you discuss whether the distinction in how images are captured impact their metadata, and if this might help us determine which capture are the most accurate?
Well, so first of all, the meta differs on at least some of the aspects during the capturing. So typically the model of the camera that was used, which lens that was being used, these are all things which are captured. Even the location and date. So in some occasions that can also tell you something about the weather situation for the capture which was done outside. The only problem is, as said, depending on the context, this might be information which you can rely on, but you have to take into account that in certain situations they might have been intentionally modified. So yes, there definitely is valuable information in the metadata that can help you to give you some insight in what you can tell from the image. White balance is one of these. So there's many parameters that do impact the overall result, but you also cannot tell everything, and that's why this paradata is so important. There is much more than what's currently captured within the metadata. So if you want to go to another level and make more detailed conclusions, then more is needed than just the typical metadata, which is automatically captured by cameras.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So the next question is, how do you detect if an image is real or fake? Is there an application that can prove it by providing scientific and authentic reports? I think you partially addressed this during your presentation, but if you want to add anything more.
Yeah, it's a huge research area. So there's many researchers that are focusing on exactly this. So developing algorithms to detect whether something is real or not. And this falls into many categories. Mostly these algorithms are focused on one specific type of manipulation. So you have algorithms specifically to detect whether something was generated by AI, like deep fake detectors, for example. But you have all the other algorithms which are specialized in detecting whether something has been manipulated in Photoshop, for example, or whether certain filters have been applied. So there's many different algorithms that can contribute to it. And if you're working with these trust profiles that I introduced at the end, for example, you can combine multiple of these algorithms together to come to a conclusion.
Okay, yeah. There's another question that is related to that because it's still about AI. So is AI or 3D able to help in making difference between real and fake? And how is 3D helping in keeping the reality of things to restore the truth and the past?
So if AI can help for the detection, or
Yes.
yeah, so most of these algorithms, almost all of these nowadays, they are AI based, and again, with AI these days, they can actually do a better job than what we can do. But as I mentioned during the presentation, one of the key issues is that well, AI is used on the both sides, so it's also improving on both sides, and that's the reason why you have this cat and mouse situation.
Thanks. Okay, the next question is about paradata. Paradata is generally approached from a human-centered perspective, not necessarily machine actionable, not necessarily machine readable. Therefore, how can paradata help with automated assessment and identification at scale of adversarial attacks on image classifiers, for example, when providing information about the digitization workflow and the overall environment context that led to creating the image dataset consumed by a CompNet?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's important to mention that there's currently, at this moment in time, many different practices in how to capture the paradata, how to store it, how to communicate it. And it's indeed, in many cases, it's just a PDF report, for example, which is ideal for us as humans to check and verify, but is indeed not best machine processable. Partners working within the Eureka 3D project, they're also working on an application where you can use a mobile application to capture the paradata. And the application will allow to persistently store it, so store it in a machine processable way, as well as to generate a user-intended report for that. So I think in the future we will evolve in a direction where there's more and more machine processable information, and as a result, that can then also be used better to be taken into account for example, the trust profiles, or for algorithms to take advantage of that information.
Okay, thank you so much. Complicated questions, but very understandable answers. So next one, if I understand, 3D is able to help us restore, rebuild, and make difference between real and fake. Is that the case? It looks like more like a statement, right, rather than a question, but...
I missed the beginning of the question. What is able to?
If I understand, 3D is able to help us to restore, rebuild, and make difference between real and fake.
I think the issues that we face in 2D are similar in 3D. I mentioned something about projection from 2D to 3D, etc. That's of course specific to 2D. But even in 3D, typically, well, in many cases, depending on the way the 3D is captured, you have a high resolution in 2 dimensions, but a much lower resolution in a 3rd dimension. So there's also some gaps in between, which are often filled in algorithmically, for example. And in 3D, well, in many cases, we don't have the level of precision yet that we currently can face in 2D for various reasons. So in some situations, well, there's more that we can conclude from a 3D capture, but in other senses, there's more that we can capture from a 2D. So I think the two go hand in hand. But many of the problems are shared between the two. Things like the impact of the weather and white balance and lighting conditions, all of these all apply both in 2D and 3D.
Okay, so the next question, I think we are running out of time, so I'm just checking if it's okay to run a bit over to answer the questions, the remaining questions. There are 3 more.
For me, it's definitely fine.
I see a thumbs up, so let's go ahead. Would you please speak more about the content authenticity initiative, which you alluded to regarding Leica and Nikon cameras, but did not name specifically?
Yeah, so the content authenticity initiative, it's it started as an industry standard with different companies involved, including BBC, for example, on the media side, but also Adobe is one of the big players that is pulling this forward, but also Microsoft is in there. So there's a lot of big companies that gathered together to develop specifications and tools for signaling of provenance information. C2PA, or Adobe specifically, was one of the proponents within JPEG Trust. So C2PA already exists a little bit longer than JPEG Trust. And since some of the goals are very similar, we have aligned the two. But just very briefly, it's an industry initiative which is gaining a lot of adoption worldwide. Specifically for the signaling of provenance information. And I mentioned these cameras, so there's at the moment only a few from Leica and Nikon, or at least two of them, or maybe Sony. We'd have to look for the exact models. But we see that there is more and more interest in it, and it's relatively fast gaining adoption.
Okay, next question. It looks like you are a machine giving answers. I've heard there are now more AI-generated images than real images on the internet. How do we authenticate the legacy images as opposed to newly created ones?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It follows. Will archives, sorry, it keeps on, okay. Will archives need to invisible watermark their digital collections and or blockchain them?
Yeah, okay, these are all great questions. So let's start from the beginning. First of all, I'm not so sure whether there currently are more AI-generated images on the internet than real images. I could not spend a lot of time on it, but if you look, basically the amount of images that are taken on a daily basis by mobile phones, for example, and spread online, these are again in the billions. So these are huge numbers. But it's definitely true that more of them are indeed generated by AI or manipulated by AI, and wherever they come from, the question is indeed with all of these images that do already exist, and you don't have information on how they were created, what do you do with these? Now, there are different situations, so it's not always necessary that you do have information from the beginning when an image was created. So this cryptographical link between the metadata, between the provenance information and the actual image can be made at any moment in time by any person. And of course, if any person can do that, it's not because this link is there that it's necessarily trustworthy, but depending on who is giving their stamp, you can decide for yourself whether you trust it or not. So like a media company, BBC, for example, if they publish an image on their website and they put their stamp on it, that should give like a quality label. It's coming from BBC and we have verified it. Whether you trust BBC or not, well, that's up to the end user. So that I hope that it's a short answer, but hopefully that more or less captures the first part. The second part is about invisible watermarking, and yes, invisible watermarking can play a role for certain use cases. And in fact, I don't know if it was mentioned in the slide already, but we recently initiated a new part of the standard specifically focused on invisible watermarking. We don't think that should be default part of the standard because there's also drawbacks related to watermarking, both the visible impact and then changes that are made to the image, as well as the reliability. But there definitely are certain use cases where watermarking can play a role and where additional interoperability is needed. So that, yes, that is something that we're working on. And the same applies for integration with blockchains. Again, blockchains is not something that we wanted to have de facto in the standard because there's many implications. You need an online connection, and there's also issues related to energy consumption of some of these blockchains. But we also admit that there definitely are valuable use cases in which blockchains can play an important role. So also there, these tools to interface with blockchains will be will be part of the standard. Whether it's necessarily needed in archiving or not, there is not a general answer. Or in general, maybe not, but there are definitely use cases where both blockchains and invisible watermarking can definitely provide valuable advantages.
Thank you. So we have 3 more questions. Let's try to go through them. Are there any additional benefits then to generative AI, such as rapid prototyping, sorry? And do you believe this to change our consideration of what authenticity is in a digital age?
Related to the first question, so yeah, rapid prototyping is one, but it just makes the creation of media much more accessible, and you already see that in articles online, for example. Instead of stock photos, you can just generate something using AI. It can also be used to make data sets for research to enhance data sets. So there's many positive and beneficial use cases of generative AI, definitely. And the second part of the question was?
Let me find it again. And do you believe this will change our consideration of what authenticity is in a digital age?
Yeah, I think these are already impacting maybe not what we consider what is authentic or not, but at least how we deal with that. I think thanks to generative AI, more and more people realize that was also the intention of some of the images that I have shown. Not all of them were generative AI, but some of them were. They have become so realistic and so difficult to distinguish from real media. And I think it's extremely important that people realize that, and that they think twice when they see something online and it looks very impressive or strange or whatever, to think twice and to double check whether it is actually real or not.
Okay, so next question. What tools are currently available and reliable for determining the confidence of generative AI heritage image? For example, digital visualization of ruins, sites, monuments, or artifacts that have missing parts, if such tools exist, of course.
It's a great answer. Sorry, it's a great question, but I do not immediately have the answer. I'm quite sure that research in the direction has been done, but I cannot immediately point to it specifically.
For the next webinar then.
Yes.
Thanks.
You can do some research later on.
In the meantime. Okay, then this is a tricky question. Can photo metadata be used in court?
Yeah, it's also a great question, and it's complicated, and of course it also depends from local regulations. So it differs from country to country. Maybe one thing that I can say about it has been used in court, but it's not used that it de facto can be used.
Okay, so questions are keeping on coming in. We have 2 more. How do you feel about them?
Okay,
let's go ahead. Okay,
with 2 more.
Yeah. Okay. So if we use invisible watermarking, can anyone hack this method so that the authenticity will be doubtful?
These are 2 different questions. First, related to hacking of invisible watermarking. All of the invisible watermarking tools that do exist do have their limitations. So in invisible watermarking, there's always a balance that you have to make between the amount of information that you want to embed, what the visible impact is, the perceptibility, this is called, on the image, and the robustness. And the robustness, that means if you're going to make changes to the image or going to do explicit at text trying to remove the watermark, how far can you go before it breaks, or in other words, that you can remove it. So none of the tools that do exist are like perfectly reliable in that sense, but in some situations, in terms of robustness, the amount of changes that you have to make before it breaks are so big that it's acceptable. In other cases, the perceptible implications of the watermark itself would be too big to be acceptable. So it's very case dependent. And there have been examples with invisible watermarking where they were broken relatively quickly when it was rolled out into the wild and on the web. So there again, I think for a big rollout using watermarking and all of the images that we share and create is definitely not the right solution. The tool is just too sensitive for that. But there are, again, specific use cases, especially also in archiving, where they do have an added value. And again, for example, this can be to prove if an image has been leaked by to who it has been licensed before, for example. So these are great applications where invisible watermarking can play a role. Also in authenticity, we use it in cases where the metadata has been stripped off, but the watermark is still there. Then you still have means to recover that metadata. So these are all the use cases that we're looking into. But yeah, we do have to recognize that there are also important limitations to be taken into account.
Okay, thanks. And this is really the last question. How do you foresee the possibility of containing information generation or data in the World Web?
I think we started from the paradata and more extensive metadata. So metadata provenance, digital provenance information, and paradata. I think the first step is that we have to make sure that it is stored somewhere, and which type of database is being used. Again, that depends on the specific context and doesn't matter that much. If you can already achieve that it is stored somewhere and that it can be linked back to the media, that's already a first big step. But secondly, and in the future, more importantly, once these images are spread in other locations, when they are going to live their own life online on social media and on websites, it's important that at that point we can still make that link back. And then somewhere in a specific archive where we do not necessarily have access to is not the right place. So we are in favor of embedding as much information as possible into the assets itself. That's not always possible for various reasons. Sometimes it's just too much overhead, and sometimes it's just an issue for privacy reasons, for example. But there are also means to not embed it in the image, but to reference it somewhere externally. And it's again one of the applications where blockchain can come into play. So one thing to all of the questions, I have to keep the answers a little bit condensed. If anyone is interested to go into more in-depth one-to-one discussions or whatever, I'm definitely open to that, because for many of them it's just my perspective and a little bit simplified answer. But these were really great questions, and I think we could go on for a long time discussing on these topics.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Frederik. So as a reminder, the recordings of the webinar will be available in the next few days. So you will be able to rewatch the webinar and find Frederik's contact information if you want to reach out directly to him.
Absolutely. Thank you to you as a host, for everyone for the organization, and of course also to everyone in the audience for being part of the webinar and for all of the great questions.
And as like a final goodbye, please don't forget that there is a new webinar upcoming on the 24th of October. So yeah, you can sign up in the chat. Helena put all the references to the websites and the sign up form. So please join us for the next webinar as well.
Thank you very much for all the attendees. And natural, thank you,
everyone,
Frederik,
and
for great presentation, and Ilaria for a perfect chairing of the
more or
event.
less. So
Bye-bye.
thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.